A judge tries to shut down Pam Bondi, but she's not having it. Watch as she takes on the court, pushes back when they try to silence her, and flips the script in the most jaw-dropping way. Will she win? You won't believe the shocking twist that changes everything. Don't miss how this battle unfolds. Stick around to see who really wins in the end. Chapter 1. Judge tries to silence her, but Pam fights back big time. Pam Bondi walked into the courtroom, the usual mix of nerves and determination setting in. She thought today was going to be like any other routine hearing. But as soon as the Judge Richard Monroe called the court to order, it felt like the walls were closing in. "Let's get this over with," Monroe said, his voice cold as he glanced over at Pam. "You violated the state code. Pay the fine." Simple as that. Just like that, it was all supposed to be over. A fine. Pam had dealt with plenty of those in her career. But this time something didn't sit right. She felt the weight of the room on her shoulders. The eyes of the entire courtroom were on her. This wasn't just about the fine. This was bigger. This was about control. Power. And Pam wasn't about to let some judge dictate her fate without a fight. "What do you mean, pay the fine?" "I'm not just rolling over for this," she shot back, her voice firm but edged with a quiet rage that rippled through the room. "You're gonna let me speak or what?" Monroe's eyes narrowed. He clearly wasn't used to being challenged, especially not in his own courtroom. He looked down at his papers, acting as if he were above the whole situation. "You can speak, but don't expect me to change my mind. This isn't a debate." Pam stood tall, her chest rising and falling with every breath. "You don't get to silence me," she snapped, her tone sharp like a blade. "I want the chance to defend myself. I won't be dismissed like some nobody." The room went still. Monroe hesitated for a second, his hand hovering over the gavel, but he couldn't keep control of the situation any longer. His mouth twitched as he muttered something about hearing her out, but Pam wasn't fooled. This was no simple hearing. This was a battle for her reputation, her rights, and she wasn't about to let it slip away. As she prepared to speak, her mind raced. She knew this wasn't just about a stupid fine. This was about a system that thought it could crush people like her without a second thought. And she wasn't going down without making some noise. "I'm here to tell you that this isn't just about the fine. It's about the principle. If you think you can just slap a fine on me without proper evidence, you're dead wrong." Pam's voice rang out louder now, as if she was calling out the entire system. "You're gonna hear me out. You don't get to skip past the truth." The tension in the room thickened. The judge didn't like being called out, and he wasn't going to let it slide. He cleared his throat and slammed his hand on the bench. "Enough of this. You've made your point, but this court has already ruled. You're guilty, and that's final." Pam wasn't having it. "No, it's not. And I'm not going anywhere until I get my fair shot. You want to fight? Well, you've got one," she said, her eyes locked onto his, unblinking. There was fire in her gaze, an unmistakable spark that told everyone in the room she wasn't backing down. "Don't think for a second you can just bully me into submission," she added, crossing her arms. "If you think I'm gonna let you pull this crap on me, you've got another thing coming. This is bigger than you, bigger than me. It's about what's right." The judge opened his mouth, but no words came out. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath as the standoff between Pam and Monroe escalated. No one knew exactly how it was going to end, but one thing was clear. This wasn't going to be the easy case everyone thought it would be. Pam had just thrown down the gauntlet, and the whole room knew it. The fight for her rights had just begun, and it was going to get messy. Chapter 2. Pam versus the judge. Who will back down first? The courtroom was thick with tension as Pam Bondi stood her ground. She wasn't about to let Judge Richard Monroe get away with brushing her off. She could feel the eyes of everyone in the room, waiting to see who would break first. Monroe was trying to maintain control, but Pam was on a mission to expose the cracks in his arrogance. "Let's be clear," Pam said, her voice steady but filled with fire. "You're not just handing me a fine without proof. That's not how this works. I'm here to fight for my rights, and you're gonna let me speak." Monroe didn't even flinch. "You've had your chance. This is a routine case. You've been found guilty. It's over," he said with a dismissive wave of his hand, clearly over it. He wasn't used to people challenging him, especially not in his own courtroom. The nerve of her. But Pam wasn't backing down. She leaned forward, her hands gripping the edge of the table. You can sit there all day and pretend you're in control, but the truth is you're wrong. You're wrong about this case and you're wrong about me. The judge's face hardened, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He was starting to realize this wasn't just some easy case he could wrap up. Pam wasn't going anywhere, and she wasn't going to let him pull any fast ones. You don't get it, do you? Pam continued, her tone sharp, almost challenging. This isn't just about a fine. It's about making sure you don't steamroll over the people who don't have a voice. And I'm not gonna let you do that today. Monroe cleared his throat, a nervous habit he usually reserved for moments when he wasn't in control. He shifted in his chair, clearly uncomfortable. I'm not the one causing a scene here, he muttered, trying to reassert some authority. I've made my decision. Pam wasn't impressed. And I'm not asking for your decision, she fired back. I'm asking for fairness. I'm asking for the truth to matter. Don't make me call you out in front of everyone. The silence that followed was thick. The room was holding its breath, watching this unexpected showdown unfold. No one expected this kind of resistance. Pam wasn't just a defendant. She was a force, and Judge Monroe was starting to realize that. He could feel the walls closing in, and it wasn't just because of Pam's words. It was the way she was making him second-guess everything. Finally, Monroe broke the silence. Fine. We'll hear your argument. But don't expect me to change my mind. Pam's eyes flashed with defiance. I don't need you to change your mind. I just need you to listen. After that, you'll have no choice but to rethink this. She could see it now, the cracks in Monroe's confidence. He wasn't so sure anymore, and Pam knew this was the moment she had to seize. She was no longer just fighting for herself. This was bigger. This was about standing up to the system, making sure people like her didn't get trampled on because of some bureaucrat's ego. As she prepared to lay out her case, Pam could almost feel the power shift in the room. Monroe was starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, he had underestimated her. But it was too late for him to backtrack. She wasn't going to let him off the hook that easily. Monroe thought this would be a quick case, but now he's in a fight he didn't see coming. Will he be able to hold his ground, or will Pam take him down with one move? Chapter 3. Pam's first move. Is Monroe finally losing control? The room was electric with anticipation as Pamm Bondi stepped forward. She wasn't just going to talk. She was going to rip apart Monroe's entire case. She could feel the weight of every eye in the room, all focused on her, waiting for the moment that would either make or break this fight. Judge Monroe shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly hoping that this was just a small bump in the road. But Pam wasn't about to let him off that easy. You say I've been found guilty, she began, her voice steady but fierce. But let's take a minute to talk about the facts. What evidence do you actually have that I'm guilty? Monroe scoffed, his arrogance barely contained. The violation is clear. The law's clear. There's nothing to discuss. Pam leaned in, making sure every word hit like a hammer. No. That's not how this works. I'm not just some pawn in your little game. You can't throw around accusations without proof. I have the right to defend myself. The judge looked ready to dismiss her again, but something was different. This time he hesitated. Pam could see the wheels turning in his head as he tried to figure out what to do next. He wasn't used to being called out like this, not by someone so determined. You really think you can just walk in here and rewrite the rules? Monroe sneered, clearly trying to regain some control. This isn't a debate. I've already made my decision. Pam was done with the games. And I'm done letting you make decisions that ruin people's lives without even blinking. You don't get to decide what happens to me without hearing me out. This isn't a traffic ticket. This is a matter of principle. There it was. The moment Monroe realized this was no longer just a routine case for him. Pam wasn't about to roll over, and she wasn't afraid to make waves. The courtroom felt like it was holding its breath, waiting to see if Monroe would back down or if Pam would bring the house down. You're gonna hear me, Judge, Pam continued, her voice now cutting through the tension. Because if you don't, you'll be the one making the mistake, not me. There was a flicker of doubt in Monroe's eyes. It was brief, but Pam caught it. For the first time, he wasn't sure if he had this in the bag. And that was exactly where Pam wanted him. Monroe's hand hovered over his gavel, his knuckles white from the pressure. It was clear he didn't like where this was heading, but Pam wasn't about to back down. "What's it gonna be, Judge?" she pressed. "Are you gonna listen to reason? Or are you gonna continue pretending you're untouchable?" He cleared his throat, trying to regain some semblance of authority. "You've had your say, but don't get too confident. The law is on my side." Pam's lips curled into a smile. "Is it, though? Let's find out." She knew this was her moment. Monroe wasn't prepared for what she was about to bring to the table. He thought he could shut her down with his so-called authority, but Pam wasn't afraid. She wasn't about to let him walk all over her, not without a fight. The room was tense as Pam went on, laying out her arguments, pulling up precedents, and pointing out the flaws in Monroe's logic. She could see it now. The judge was rattled, and it wasn't just his pride that was at stake. If she played her cards right, she could turn this whole thing around. But there was no turning back now. She had to win, and she had to win big. Monroe thought this was a done deal, but Pam's first move has the judge second-guessing everything. Will he recover? Or is his control slipping? Keep watching, it's just getting started. Chapter 4. The Wild Card. A new judge entered the game, and it's about to get real. Just when Pam thought she had Judge Monroe on the ropes, the unexpected happened. The courtroom door swung open, and in walked Judge Thomas Whitaker. Pam's heart skipped a beat. She knew this wasn't good. Monroe wasn't about to call in another judge unless things were about to get a lot more complicated. Monroe looked at Whitaker with a cold, calculated look. "We need another opinion," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Pam's mind raced. She'd already played her cards. She wasn't backing down, but now with Whitaker entering the scene, everything felt uncertain. Was this just another power move? Or was Whitaker really there to bring balance to the mess Monroe had created? "Let's get this over with," Whitaker said, his voice calm, almost clinical. But Pam could sense the underlying tension. He wasn't here to make small talk. He was here to decide how far this was going to go. Monroe motioned to the table where Pam was sitting. "Let's get back to the facts. She's already made her case. She's challenging the fine, but the law is clear." Pam's eyes locked onto Whitaker, trying to read him, trying to figure out what side he was on. She couldn't afford to let him get away with just rubber-stamping Monroe's decisions. This wasn't just about a fine anymore. It was about making sure the system didn't crush her. Whitaker shifted his gaze toward Pam, raising an eyebrow. "You're confident you've got a point here, huh?" Pam took a deep breath, then leaned forward. "I'm not just confident. I'm right. The law isn't as clear as you think. You can't just hand out fines without real evidence. There's no proof, and there's no reason for this." Monroe shot her a warning glance, but Whitaker just nodded slowly, clearly intrigued. "We'll see about that. But remember, you're not just challenging the fine. You're questioning the authority of the court." Pam wasn't intimidated. She stood up straighter, ready for anything. "I'm not questioning the authority. I'm questioning the integrity. The law should be about fairness. If it's not, then what's the point?" Whitaker looked at her for a long moment, and for a second, it felt like he was weighing her words. Monroe, on the other hand, was getting visibly frustrated. He clearly didn't want to let this drag on any longer, but Pam was making too strong of a case to ignore. "I don't see the issue with the fine," Monroe insisted, his voice rising. "She broke the law. It's simple." But Whitaker wasn't buying it. "That's not enough, Richard. You need more than a simple violation to justify a fine like this. Where's the evidence? Where's the proof?" Pam's pulse quickened. This was it. She'd made her move, and now it was paying off. The new judge wasn't just going to let this slide. "You're right," Pam said, her voice unwavering. "There's no hard evidence. Just a subjective opinion from an officer who couldn't even provide proof of what happened. I'm asking for justice, not just a slap on the wrist." Whitaker glanced at Monroe, his eyes narrowed. "I think we need to take a closer look at this case. We're not just going to hand out fines based on assumptions." Monroe shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He didn't like this. He didn't like being questioned, and he certainly didn't like being forced to consider the possibility that he might be wrong. "I think we need to consider all the facts before making a decision," Whitaker added, his tone calm but firm. And that includes questioning whether the fine was even valid. The courtroom was dead silent now. Every single person in that room knew something had just shifted. This wasn't the easy case Monroe thought it was. And now, with Whitaker in the picture, things were about to get even more complicated. Monroe thought he had it all wrapped up. But now, with Whitaker entering the scene, everything is in play. Who's going to come out on top in this courtroom battle? The stakes have just been raised. Keep watching because this fight is far from over. Chapter 5. Pam's power move. The courtroom goes silent. The tension in the courtroom was palpable. Pamm Bondi had already shaken up the room with her unflinching stance against Judge Monroe. But now, with Judge Whitaker joining the fray, the stakes were higher than ever. The game had changed and everyone knew it. Monroe wasn't used to being questioned. He'd been in this game for years, and no one had ever dared to challenge him like this. But now, in front of Whitaker, he was starting to feel the pressure. The air felt thick with uncertainty. "So," Pam said, her voice calm but cutting through the tension like a knife. "You want to stand by this fine, huh? Fine without proof. Fine without any real evidence." Monroe clenched his fists. "I'm standing by it because the law's clear. You broke it. You pay the price." Pam raised an eyebrow, unfazed by Monroe's growing frustration. "It's not about the price, it's about the principle. You can't just throw a fine on someone and say, 'Deal with it.' That's not how the system works. At least it's not supposed to." She turned to Whitaker, hoping for some kind of response. Whitaker was quiet, studying the case, his eyes shifting from Monroe to Pam. It felt like everyone in the room was holding their breath. "I'm gonna be real with you," Pam continued, her voice steady. "This whole thing stinks. The law says one thing, but the way you're using it feels like you're just pushing an agenda. And I won't let that slide." Monroe's face turned red. He wasn't used to being challenged like this, and certainly not by someone like Pam. His voice shook with barely contained anger. "You don't get to dictate the rules of this courtroom. I'm the judge here. But you don't get to break the law just because you wear a robe either." Pam shot back, her eyes blazing. "You think that title makes you invincible? Newsflash, it doesn't. You're human. And you can make mistakes just like everyone else." The courtroom was dead silent now. No one dared to make a sound. Pam's words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Monroe looked like he was about to explode, but Whitaker suddenly spoke up, his voice calm but firm. "Richard, let's step back for a second," Whitaker said. "We're not here to see who can shout the loudest. We're here to figure out what's right. And what I'm hearing is that there's no real proof of wrongdoing. The law doesn't work on assumptions." Monroe opened his mouth to protest, but Whitaker held up a hand. "I get it. You've made your ruling. But if we're going to make this stick, we need something concrete. We need real evidence." Pam wasn't holding back now. "Exactly. There's no evidence. Just the word of an officer who didn't even bother to collect proof. He didn't take pictures. He didn't write anything down. He just made a snap judgment." Monroe stared at her, his face a mix of disbelief and frustration. He wasn't sure how to respond. For the first time in this entire case, he wasn't the one in control. The power was shifting and he didn't like it. Pam wasn't done. The law is supposed to protect people, not crush them based on someone's gut feeling. "If you're going to punish me, at least show me you've got something more than a hunch." Whitaker leaned forward in his chair. His fingers steepled in front of him as he thought. "I think it's clear we need to take a deeper look at this. We can't just hand out fines because someone says so. There has to be evidence." Monroe gritted his teeth, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the bench. He was losing ground and he knew it. He could feel the room shift in favor of Pam's argument, and it was driving him crazy. "Enough," Monroe finally snapped. "This isn't a debate. You're guilty and that's final." But Pam wasn't intimidated. "You can keep telling yourself that, but the truth is, you're not as invincible as you think. And today the truth is gonna come out." The silence in the room was deafening. No one knew how this was going to play out, but everyone knew one thing for sure. Pam wasn't going down without a fight. She just made her most powerful move yet, and it was clear that the tides were turning. Pam's words hit harder than anything Monroe could throw at her. The courtroom is on edge, and everything is about to explode. Will Pam's relentless fight for justice break the system? Or will Monroe find a way to win? Keep watching, this battle is far from over. Chapter 6. The cross-examination that blew the case wide open. The courtroom was electric as Pam Bondi walked up to the witness stand. It was time for her next move, and she wasn't about to hold back. Officer Nathan Ellis was her target, and she was ready to break him down piece by piece. This wasn't just about proving her innocence. It was about showing that this whole case was built on sand. Ellis sat stiffly, his uniform as neat as ever, but the sweat beading on his forehead told a different story. He knew what was coming, and he wasn't prepared for Pam. She was about to turn the tables. Pam took a deep breath, her eyes never leaving Ellis. "Officer Ellis, you're the one who issued the fine, correct?" Ellis nodded quickly, not meeting her gaze. "Yes, ma'am. That's correct." "Okay, so let's talk about that fine. What exactly made you decide to hand it out?" Ellis cleared his throat, shifting in his seat. "Well, I saw the violation. I've been in this job a long time. I just know when something's wrong." Pam raised an eyebrow. "You just know?" she asked, her voice dripping with disbelief. "You didn't take any pictures? Didn't write anything down? Just a gut feeling?" The room went quiet. Even Judge Monroe seemed to shift uncomfortably. But Ellis stuck to his story. "Look, I've been doing this for years. I don't need photos to know what I saw." Pam didn't flinch. "So you're telling me you're handing out fines based on your feelings and not on any real evidence? No written report? No proof?" Ellis opened his mouth, but no words came out. He wasn't prepared for this kind of questioning. Pam had him backed into a corner, and there was no way out. She didn't give him a chance to recover. "So let me get this straight. You're telling the court that a fine, something that could affect someone's life, is based on nothing more than your opinion? That's what you're saying?" Ellis shifted again, his eyes darting around the room. He could feel the pressure mounting, but he had no answer. I didn't think it would be a problem," he muttered, his voice wavering now. Pam stepped closer to him, her eyes narrowing. "But you didn't think it was a problem to ruin someone's day, or maybe their whole week, over a feeling? No evidence. No backup. Just a feeling." The room was on edge. Monroe looked like he was about to intervene, but Pam was relentless. She wasn't going to let Ellis off the hook that easily. "You do realize," she said, voice low and dangerous, "that without real evidence this entire case is built on nothing. A mistake, a bad call, that could cost me. It's all in your hands, and you've got nothing but your gut to back it up." Ellis finally cracked. I didn't think it would go this far," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't realize how serious it was." Pam's eyes locked onto him. "You didn't realize? You're the one who made the call. And now you're telling the court that you didn't even think it was serious? That's a problem, officer. A big one." The room felt like it was holding its breath as Ellis squirmed in his seat. His credibility was shattered, and Pam had just made sure the entire courtroom knew it. She turned to Judge Whitaker and Monroe, making sure her next words landed with precision. "Without evidence, without proof, this whole case is a joke. You're basing a fine on an officer's opinion, and that's not justice. It's a gamble." Whitaker glanced at Monroe, who was visibly frustrated. Pam had just torn apart their case, and they both knew it. Ellis was a shaky witness at best, and now his testimony was crumbling under the weight of Pam's questions. Monroe tried to regain control, but it was too late. The damage had been done. Pam had flipped the whole narrative on its head. This wasn't just about a fine anymore. It was about whether the entire system would get away with punishing people without a shred of evidence. Pam just blew the case wide open, and Officer Ellis has nowhere to hide. The pressure's mounting, and this case is on the edge of collapse. Will the judges finally see the truth? Or is Pam's fight just beginning? Stay tuned, this showdown is far from over. Chapter 7. Pam's final blow. Can Monroe handle the heat? The courtroom felt like it was on the edge of exploding. Judge Monroe had already seen his case begin to unravel, and now Pam was going in for the kill. She wasn't going to let up. Not now, not ever. The last few minutes had been nothing short of a roller coaster, and it was clear that the tables had turned. Pam stood confidently, looking directly at Monroe. She could feel the weight of the moment hanging in the air. This wasn't just a fight for her. This was about sending a message. You've seen the truth now, she began, her voice cool but firm. No proof, no evidence. Just assumptions and gut feelings. And yet, here we are. Monroe shifted uncomfortably in his seat, trying to hold on to what little control he had left. Enough, Miss Bondi. This is getting out of hand. The law is clear. You broke it. Pam didn't flinch. The law may be clear, but the application of that law is what's at stake here. You can't just pull a fine out of thin air based on someone's feeling about a violation. She paused, making sure everyone in the room understood the gravity of what she was saying. What you're doing here is dangerous, Monroe. You're letting people get punished without proper proof, and that's not justice. That's abuse of power. The courtroom was dead silent. You could feel the tension in the air as the judges exchanged uneasy glances. Monroe looked like he was about to snap, but Pam wasn't backing down. She wasn't going to let him silence her now. You can keep pushing your narrative, but you know I'm right, Pam continued, her voice steady but filled with undeniable force. Without evidence, without any proof that this fine is warranted, this whole thing is nothing but a sham. Monroe was sweating now. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the bench, trying to hold it together. But he knew deep down that Pam had just landed the final blow. The case was unraveling, and there was no going back. You can't dismiss this, Monroe. Not after everything I've shown. Not after what you've seen, Pam said, her eyes locked on his, refusing to break the stare. You've got to answer for what you've done here. And that means taking responsibility for your actions. Whitaker watched the scene unfold in front of him, his face neutral but his eyes sharp. He was taking it all in, weighing Pam's words carefully. This wasn't just about the fine anymore. It was about making sure the system didn't get away with taking advantage of people. Monroe tried to speak, but his words failed him. He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. This is ridiculous, Bondi. You're making this personal. Pam's smile was thin but confident.
No, Monroe.
I'm making this about what's right. And right now, you're on the wrong side of it. The silence stretched on as everyone waited for the next move. It was clear that Pam had the upper hand now. Monroe was on the ropes, and Pam wasn't going to let him out of the corner. This is it, the final showdown. Pam just dropped the mic, and there's no coming back for Monroe. Will he admit defeat? Or is this just the beginning of a bigger fight? Stay tuned, Pam's not finished yet. Chapter 8. The unbelievable verdict. Did Pam just win it all? The room was frozen in silence. Pamm Bondi had just delivered the knockout punch, and now it was up to the judges to decide what came next. Judge Monroe looked like he'd been caught in the crossfire, his face flushed with frustration and defeat. Whitaker sat back in his chair, quietly observing, his expression unreadable. Everyone in that room knew this wasn't just about a fine anymore. It was about power, justice, and the system itself. The tension was thick as Monroe banged his gavel for the final time that day. "We'll take a recess," he muttered, clearly defeated. "Let me think this through." Pam stayed where she was, her eyes locked on the judge. She wasn't about to give up now. The last few hours had been nothing short of a battle, but she could feel it in her bones. She was about to win this. As the courtroom emptied for the break, Pam stayed seated, arms crossed, her mind racing through every argument she had made, every point she had driven home. She had exposed the holes in the case, torn apart the idea that someone's gut feeling could be enough to penalize a person's life. This was bigger than just her, it was about what was right. Monroe paced back and forth in the judge's chamber, visibly agitated. He was sweating, muttering to himself. Whitaker stood by the window, watching the scene unfold with a certain calm, but his eyes didn't leave Monroe. "I can't believe we're at this point," Monroe muttered, turning back to Whitaker. "I'm not sure how much more we can let her push this. She's relentless." Whitaker didn't flinch. "She's got a point. We can't just ignore the facts she's laid out. If we don't make the right decision, we're setting a dangerous precedent." Monroe didn't answer right away. He looked like he was weighing his options. Then, with a resigned sigh, he turned back to Whitaker. "I know, but this is gonna make things complicated. It's not just about the fine anymore. It's about the integrity of the court." The two men stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the decision hanging in the air. Finally, Monroe made his decision. He turned to the door. "Let's do this." When the judges returned to the courtroom, the atmosphere was electric. Pam stood tall, but her heart was pounding. She could feel the eyes of everyone on her. Whitaker sat down first, then Monroe took his seat, his eyes briefly meeting hers. There was a moment of tension before he cleared his throat. "The court has come to a decision," Monroe began, his voice strained but holding firm. "After considering the arguments presented, we've decided to." He paused for a long moment, almost as if he was trying to find the right words. Pam held her breath. "We've decided to drop the fine," Monroe finally said, his voice reluctant but clear. Ms. Bondi's arguments were persuasive, and in light of the lack of concrete evidence, the fine will be nullified. A wave of disbelief washed over the room. Pam could hardly believe it. For a moment she didn't even move. She had done it. She had won. Not just the case but the fight for justice. But then something shifted in her. She wasn't going to let this moment slip by unnoticed. "And let me just remind the court," Pam added, her voice ringing with finality, "that this case was never just about me. It's about ensuring that justice doesn't get twisted by assumptions or gut feelings. We're all accountable, and that's something we can't forget." Monroe's face was unreadable, but Whitaker gave a subtle nod of approval. The tension in the room started to lift, but Pam could feel the weight of the moment in her chest. Pam just got the verdict she fought for, but the fight's not over yet. Will this victory be enough to spark real change? Or is this just the beginning? Stay tuned. This story is far from finished. The unbelievable victory. Pam takes down the system. Pamm Bondi just did the impossible. She took on the courtroom, exposed the lies, and made sure justice wasn't just a word on paper. With no evidence, no backup, and just pure will, she tore down the corrupt system and walked out victorious. This wasn't just a win for her, it was a message to everyone. Don't mess with the truth. But this battle's over. The war? It's just getting started. Want to see more epic moments like this? Hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and don't forget to ring the bell so you don't miss the next explosive story. You won't want to miss what's coming next.